I grew up in San Jose, California, a very diverse place, and for some reason, my best friends growing up were Muslim. I remember in middle school playing basketball with them outside, and at one point in the game, they had to stop to go pray in the gym. Now, up till then, I didn't think that we were any different from each other. But as I waited in the doorway, holding the basketball, watching them pray, I realized that we were different from each other. And with every dinner that I would have at their house at night, I would see the pictures of Mecca and hear the calls to prayer. And it was kind of unfamiliar at first, but over time, what was at first unfamiliar became more familiar and more comfortable. Today, I have a visceral comfort when I see Muslims or think of Muslims. And so naturally, when I came to UC Irvine as an undergraduate, I decided to get to know people in the Muslim Student Union. My first roommate in college, however, was Jewish. And I became close friends with him, and I hung out with his Jewish fraternity friends and went to their parties, and I went to sukkah hops and Shabbat dinners with them. And every night in our room, while we were drinking beer and talking, he would tell me about something very important to him, a place, a country called Israel. Now, he told me about how much this country meant to him, how he, as a young Jewish man, had grown up listening to his parents talk about how they were persecuted in Egypt for being Jewish, and how with the creation of Israel in 1948, he felt a sense of safety, of belonging. For the first time, the Jewish people had a homeland, a country to call their own. So many Jewish people had been exterminated in the Holocaust that now they were fighting every day to preserve their country. And this country, this tiny little red speck of land, was surrounded by people who didn't want them there, he told me. Muslims and Arabs, all that green, and they just wanted that one piece of land. And so I listened to this almost every other night, and I thought it was incredible. I was excited to tell my Palestinian friend about this back home in San Jose. I went back home, and I went up to my friend who was Muslim and Palestinian, and I said to him, "Dude, you're Palestinian. I can't believe we've never talked about this Israel-Palestine conflict, this Israel-Arab conflict. You're pro-Israel, right?" And he looked at me, and he said, "Are you crazy?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "How can I be in support of a country that is oppressing my people?" It's like, "What are you talking about?" And he began to tell me his side of the story. He told me about how his parents, his grandparents, used to own all this land in Palestine. And then in 1948, Israel was created, and how the Jews took all their land, all their olive trees, and how every day, every year, Palestine has been losing its land, all that green, diminishing, slipping away, and how Palestinians must wait in checkpoints, often hours at a time, and how they are being oppressed under the thumb of the Israelis. And I was very confused now because I was hearing my friend's story, and I had my roommate's story in my mind. So that evening I said, "You know what? I'm really confused, so I want you to meet my roommate because you guys have been telling me really different stuff." So I got my laptop, and I turned on the Skype, and I called my roommate, and I said, "Hey, this is my friend. He's Palestinian. You guys have been telling me really different stuff. Talk." Now, this is a blank slide because I want you to imagine what kind of conversation started from there. They started at 10 p.m. It was kind of awkward, slow at first, but soon they escalated and erupted into flames of emotion and anger. They were talking about stuff I had never even heard of. They were screaming at each other. My two best friends looked like they hated each other. At one point, I had to grab my laptop, run to the bathroom, and lock myself in there and calm down my roommate. He was almost in tears. The conversation ended at 3 a.m. It was 5 straight hours. That evening, as an undergraduate in college, I knew that I wanted to devote the rest of my life not to tattoos, but to understanding this Israel-Palestine crazy conflict. Back on campus, it was very easy then to notice that the pro-Israel groups and the pro-Palestine groups would invite controversial speakers, and there was a lot of tension on our campus regarding this conflict. We were on national news. And there were shouting matches on campus, on the ring road where most of the students congregated. And because I had friends on both sides, pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, Muslims and Jews, it was so frustrating to see them scream at each other. Not frustrating because they had differences, but I was just frustrated because they wouldn't even listen to each other to really know what their differences were. And that brings me to my second story. One day, I saw a girl crying on Ring Road. She was beneath an Israeli flag that had blood on it, and that was a display that had been put on by another organization. And out of concern for another human being, I went up to her and said, "Are you all right?" And she said, "Look at this. This is my identity. This is me. Look at what they're doing." In my mind, I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to say, well, think about what they're going through. Like, think about why they would do this. But I kept my mouth shut, and I just listened. And I ended up becoming a really close friend of her. She was from London. She had lived in Israel for a few years. By the time it was winter break, I asked her, "Hey, you're not going to go back to London. What are you going to do for winter break? Why don't you come up to San Jose and meet my friends?" She said, "All right." And so I started listing off the names of my friends, and when I got to the name Muhammad, she said, "Wait, is he Muslim?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I don't know, Kevin. I don't know." I was like, "Are you serious?" He said, "Kevin, you don't understand. I grew up bullied by Muslim boys. I lived in Israel. I can't listen to fireworks anymore because they sound like the rockets that used to come over my head." I said, "Well, okay, come on. He's my best friend. Jesus, just meet him." She said, "I don't know." This went back and forth for a few hours, and eventually I convinced her to take the 6-hour bus ride up to San Jose. The first night that she met Muhammad, they became romantically involved. At a party, and I didn't even know about it until the next day. And for the 2 weeks of winter break, I couldn't even separate them. It was actually annoying because I wanted to hang out with Muhammad. Later, I asked her, "So you had such strong feelings about the Israel-Palestine conflict, but after meeting Muhammad, did anything change politically in your head?" And she said, "Yeah, Kevin, I realized that it's so much more complex. I realized that not all Palestinians hate Jews. I don't know, it made me think a lot more." Things were a little different on campus. The tension was palpable. However, a few Muslim and Jewish students, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel students, thought maybe we need to learn about this conflict in a better way. I know we have the media, we have books we can read, but let's go to the region. Let's see the conflict for ourselves. Let's meet the people there who have to live it every day. Let's see the details. And so we said, okay, let's plan this. Let's do it. So we started meeting every week, and we realized we need a lot of money to send students to the Middle East. And so we went to churches, synagogues, mosques. We presented in people's homes, and we told them about what we wanted to do. And after a year, we raised $75,000 to bring 20 diverse students to Israel and Palestine. We got on an airplane, finally, with curiosity in our minds, a vulnerability to learn in our hearts, and a packed itinerary in our pockets. For 3 weeks, we would be meeting with politicians, students, activists, bereaved parents, and normal people on all the sides of the issue in Israel and the Palestinian territories. And that way, we would cross mental borders And we crossed physical borders, meeting them in their homes, refugee camps, offices, cemeteries. We could smell what it was like in the atmosphere of a checkpoint as we waited, where Palestinians have to wait, many of them every day for hours at a time. We could touch and feel the rustiness of a Qassam rocket in the backyard of a police station in a southern town in Israel, a town where there are bomb shelters everywhere, and you have 15 seconds to run for your life listening to that siren. We could listen to the tremor in a mother's voice as she describes how her son was killed by the other, her innocent son. And we could see the holy sites, so sacred to Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and see how close they were to each other and how important this land was to them. And in this way, we learned. Here is Danny Tirza, the architect of the separation barrier that separates Israelis and Palestinians. We could see the details of this. To many people, this barrier is a security, effective measure of security. And to many others, it's an apartheid wall that creates an open-air prison. And so you see, this trip, by engaging our whole bodies, it was intense, emotionally and intellectually. And this intensity, you have to keep in mind, many of these students that went on this trip, they were raised their whole lives with one narrative and a particular enemy. But these students, these young adults, were brave enough to go there and listen to their so-called enemy on their turf, describing their reality. And what this did was kind of magical and kind of strange. The way I would describe it is that it was so emotional, and there were these emotional earthquakes caused by the shifting tectonic plates of their soul, changing the surface area of their soul, and so that they can allow more in. Another metaphor I would think of is they were broken into a million pieces, shattered on the ground, and in the process of picking themselves back up and rearranging them in new ways, a new self began to become formed, a more passionate self, one that was aware of the details and the complexities in these situations. And this generated a kind of energy. When we came back from the trip, this energy was not destroyed. Anybody who's taken high school physics knows that the first law of thermodynamics states that energy is never created or destroyed. It only changes form. Indeed, the energy that was created had been existing from the Israel-Palestine conflict, and the energy that was created changed form. When we came back to our campuses, we revisited those churches, mosques, synagogues, and we told people what we learned. We engaged our peers, and a new conversation developed on campus, one that was more rigorous, one that was full of listening and learning, and there were less shouting matches. And why? Because there were less blind spots. The students had gone to the region and seen the different perspectives, and they had facts that they could back it up with. They didn't give sound bites. Now, another special kind of energy was created, potential energy. And so after these students graduated, that energy became kinetic energy. They went back to the region to work. They went to Washington, D.C. to get involved with politics, with world issues. Many of them had changed their majors from whatever into conflict resolution and political science, international relations. And so people were doing amazing things. For example, Arman Rowther, he just won the Fulbright Scholarship, and right now he's in Jordan, a country right next to Israel, Palestine, and he is working on health issues for Palestinian refugees. Megan Braun just won the Rhodes Scholarship, and she's in Oxford writing articles and publishing critiques on drones. Many of these students say they would have never done these things if it were not for this trip. Me, now I'm a Ph.D. student in political theory, and it's very different from what I used to want to do, which was a tattoo artist. And I do have a tattoo that I want to share with you. On my wrist, I had the word energy tattooed. And the reason I got this tattooed 8 years ago was because I saw in a high school biology textbook that the definition of energy was the capacity to cause change. And indeed, this organization was energy. When we came back, more people saw what we were doing and they were curious. They said, I want to go on this trip. And so we'd, okay, we'll help you out. And by the summer, they did go. And then the next and the next. We were beginning to become an organization. We called ourselves the Olive Tree Initiative. And so, it would be a pity to lose track of all these alumni who have gone on the trip and gone off into the world to do amazing things. It would be a pity, because that energy would just dissipate. What if this energy could be channeled? And imagine how much more powerful that would be. So how should we do that? Well, we created a separate website just for the alumni. And on this website, there's a world map. And on the map will be covered with dots, each representing an alumnus who has gone on the trip. In a few weeks, it's going to have over 250, representing all the students that have gone on a trip to the Middle East since 2008 from 8 different campuses. And the idea is that when you click on the dot, you can see who they are, what their interests are professionally, personally, what they're up to in life, and you can get in touch with them and plan face-to-face conversations and collaborate with them. The idea is that one day, when Megan, the Rhodes Scholar, becomes, Secretary of State, she can easily call up Armand Rather, who is director of a super successful health organization in the Middle East, and they can synergize their skills, their diverse skills, and now they are in much higher positions of power. And they are leaders with less blind spots because they had the experiential education. We have not confined ourselves to just Israel-Palestine. Now we also go to Turkey, Armenia. Before we go to the Middle East, we go to Washington, D.C. to meet with our nation's leaders who are dealing with foreign affairs and see how they deal with them. And then we go to New York to meet with people in the United Nations. So although this story that I've told you has been the story of the Olive Tree Initiative, what it's really about is a philosophy in action done by young people like you, and how experiential education can generate a kind of leadership, and how a network of these leaders is necessary to tackle world issues. Thank you.